So, how does somebody go from serving in the Army Special Forces to now being not only a writer himself, but helping hundreds of other people and other authors write their nonfiction novel or their fiction novel? Welcome to the Stories of Service podcast, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service podcast, Teresa Carpenter. And Randy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. You work with a lot of people that I know and am very familiar with, like Scott Mann and Joe Byerly, and just a bunch of other people. In fact, somebody else even commented on my post that I put on LinkedIn about this show. So you're quite well known in the literary world, and I'm just excited to get into your story and to hear more about your journey. But before we get started, as we always do, here's an intro from my father, Charlie Pickard.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to SOS, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter, here from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
And as I said, Randall Surles is a military editor and MFA with creative writing and a retired sergeant major with 40 plus years of combined experience in elite military units in the literary world. He spent over 22 decades in the United States Army, first as an infantryman in the 75th Ranger Regiment, then as a Green Beret specializing in medicine, weapons, tactics, and intelligence. But his story didn't end with retirement. While still on active duty, he earned his bachelor's in the U.S. history and an MFA in creative writing. And now he's a certified story grid editor, and we'll talk about what that means, and the powerhouse behind dozens of best-selling books. Whether he's coaching authors, ghostwriting gripping nonfiction, or editing high-stakes thrillers, Randy brings a battlefield-honored discipline to the creative process. And so today, we're going to talk about his transition from military operations to creative storytelling, the mindset shift from warfighter to wordsmith, what it takes to write and edit best-selling military fiction and nonfiction, the hidden truths behind ghostwriting for high-profile clients, and how storytelling can serve as a mission of its own. Welcome again, Randy.
Thanks.
So I always start off these conversations with, where were you born and raised, and what inspired you to join the Army?
Geez, that's going to be like a whole nother hour, Teresa. I was born in Houston. My father worked on the space shuttle that went to the moon. He worked for IBM at that time, and then he worked for Ross Perot EDS. He owned electronic data systems. He owned a computer company, and we traveled all around the world. So after I was born, we moved all over the States. When I was in third grade, we moved to Iran, and we were there for 3 years. During the revolution, we got evacuated out. Little known story. A couple people from my dad's company got put in jail in Iran, and Ross Perot put a mercenary group together and rescued them. So it's like a crazy story that he hired Ken Follett, best-selling author, to write a book about it, a true story book called On the Wings of Eagles, because Ross Perot called all his guys that worked for him Eagles, and then a lot of ex-military. And so we got evacuated out of that. I went to London. I went 5 years in the Netherlands. Went back to London, got out of high school in London. My parents moved to Korea soon after that. I went to college for a year in San Antonio. I didn't want to go to college. My dad persuaded me to go to college and try it out because he loved college. I didn't really like college when I went, so I went for a year, and then I enlisted in the Army with a Ranger contract because we weren't at war. We hadn't been at war in a while, so that wasn't really on my mind.
What year did you join?
87.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I joined for the adventure. I wanted to scuba dive. I want to learn how to scuba dive and rock climb and parachute, and I didn't have any money to pay for it, so I thought that was the best way forward. And I got a Ranger contract, and then 4 years in the Rangers, I went into the Green Berets.
Wow. And so for the people who are listening who don't know exactly what Green Berets do, can you give us a little bit of an explanation?
Warrior diplomats is often the words that are used. Usually 12-man teams, specialized in language and culture of a specific part of the world. So we have 5 different Green Beret units. One covers Asia, one covers Middle East, South America, Africa, and Middle East. Oh, did I say Middle East? What's the other one? I think that's Europe.
Europe? Yep.
Yeah. So, and then we go down and we work with the militaries of those countries, sometimes the police force if they don't have militaries, and we train them up in things that help the United States security profile, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So we'll train them in how to combat guerrillas in the case of, Colombia, FARC. We'll train the Panamanian police to protect their borders. We'll go to Afghanistan and, stand up their army and their border patrol and stuff like that. So that's what we did. And then, of course, the best Green Beret mission, except for, Vietnam, was Afghanistan. That's, 6 or 12 Green Beret teams from 5th Group on the ground, in the first days of the war, calling in fire, working with the warlords. There's a, 12 Strong is a great movie, true story about a Green Beret team that merged with the warlords down there. So that's kind of our mission, is to kind of work behind enemy lines with friendly forces, and that's the nuts and bolts of it.
So the picture that you shared with me that I made the cover photo for the promo, can you tell us a little bit about what was going on that day?
Sure. So Afghanistan, 2002. So a little bit over a year after 9/11. And I was down there. I was attached to an actual Green Beret National Guard unit. And we were just doing a med cap. So we were doing medical in the village, and ideally to get intelligence. So we show our goodwill, and ideally people are coming to us, trusting us more and giving us information so we can catch bad guys. That was kind of and also security around the base we live. So the goodwill to us turns into, hey, the bad guys are coming, wake up.
Mm-hmm. Did you think that when you joined, that you would continue and make it into a 20-year career? Or did you think, I'm just going to get in and do my few years and then get out?
I didn't have a plan. I didn't know. I mean, every enlistment was a surprise until I think I got the 3rd enlistment was at 12 years. And I'm like, well, I'm halfway there now. I don't think I ever thought about getting out after that.
Right.
But the first couple, I was just like, so I did 4 years in the Rangers, and then I was like, I think I'll be a Green Beret. He's like, well, you're going to have to re-enlist, okay. So I re-enlisted to go to the Green Berets. Fortunately, I made it through. Like a lot of people don't, right? And then after by the time my second enlistment is up, I'd only been in the Green Berets for a year, because it takes 2.5 years to go through the dang school. And then I re-enlisted again. And before I know it, I had 12 years. And I was like, well, I might as well stay in until 20 now. So I ended up doing 31 and a half.
Wow. Okay. My gosh. Okay. So yeah, you did a lot of time in the military, and at that 31-year mark, did you know what you wanted to do? Or because it sounded like from when I was reading your bio that you did, because you started going to school even while you were still on active duty.
So I started school like as soon as they started letting me take classes, because my dad was not very happy that I joined the military. He was a Vietnam era person, and he was of the opinion, my dad we were probably upper middle class most of my life. We lived well. The company paid for a lot of it, but there's a lot of perks for living overseas. And so he didn't think that I would be happy in the Army. He didn't think that I would be able to live the way that we lived before and travel the way we did, because I would, especially as an enlisted guy. He was like, well, at least go in the university and become an officer.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't think that's what I want to do. I didn't know the difference really, but I was like, that takes 4 years and I have to go to university, which I didn't like the first year I did it. So I don't think I want to do that. And so what was the question?
I was just asking kind of in general, like, did you think that you were going to study and go into academia? And you said yes, because your dad
So my father said, well, when you go to the recruiter, at least get a job that you can use when you get out. And my dad was in the National Guard or the reserves during Vietnam, and he was electrical engineer or like a generator repairman. And when he got out, he could do amazing things. He could like rebuild a Jeep engine in Iran from, nuts and bolts at the corner store. And he could do, and I can't do that.
Awesome.
So I went to the recruiter and they showed me a bunch of videotapes of possible jobs that didn't look very promising. And I said, I was thinking about a Ranger, and they showed me that one. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I remember my dad says, like, do they have like, I don't know, combat engineers in the Rangers? Like, nope. I was like, okay, I'll just be a Ranger then. And then when I came home, my dad's like, you're just going to be a grunt. And I was like, I'll be a happy grunt. So then when I got in, though, that always in the back of my mind, like, I'm going to get out someday, because you're
going to need to have a skill. Yeah.
So from the moment I got in there, whenever we weren't doing anything or between AIT and basic or whatever, I was like, take a class here, take a class there, do a CLEP test here, CLEP test there. By the time I actually got down to like trying to get a degree, I had probably had 120 hours of weird stuff. And I went there and I gave it to a counselor. I said, I just want a degree the fastest I can get a degree, whatever degree it is. And he's like, well, it looks like U.S. history, you'll probably need 6 more classes. I was like, sold. And so that's how I got my history degree. And then after that, I was like, well, now I might as well get my master's. Maybe I'll get out in 3 years. So I studied international relations for a semester. Then I went to Afghanistan and I had to put it to rest. And I wasn't really interested in it. I was like, what am I going to do with this? And then I got sent to Colombia to work at the embassy for 4 years and it just happened to be during the hostage crisis down there when we had the guys taken by the FARC. They weren't taken. Well, they were taken while I was down there, but they were also still there while I was working in the embassy, and they got rescued, and so I was kind of working around trying to go to the meetings and coordinate stuff for that. And I was like, well, and after they were rescued, I was like, well, now I only went down there to, hopefully help in some capacity in that. And my part was very small. And after they're done, now I was just doing a bunch of administrative work. And I was like, well, I guess, and one of my soldiers was getting an MBA. And I was like, how are you doing? What school is that at? So I started taking some MBA classes, but that wasn't very fun either. So I did like 9 hours or 12 hours of MBA stuff, and I dropped that. And then I was like, what I really want to do is write. I really just want to write. And it was just in the starting phases of like online courses.
Did you know what you wanted to write about?
I wanted to write fiction.
Okay.
That's what I love writing. I mean, most of these books behind me are fiction, except for the ones that I was involved in helping people write for themselves. And I was whoops.
I just put you on full screen. Yeah. Cause I wanted people to see the books.
Yeah. So I read my whole career, wherever I was, I had a paperback book in my pocket, which is just big enough for a paperback book. If no one knows, whenever I went on deployments, I would bring a Contigo box of books. Mm-hmm. I would have like, hey, these are my professional development books. These are my fun books. These are my military professional books. I'm going to read, and I'd go for 6 months and I'd knock most of them out. I'd go to Barnes and Noble's like a week before I left and just like buy books. It's all before Amazon and Kindle and stuff would be so much easier now. And so I
like a paper book. I don't know. I'm old fashioned. I still find myself ordering paper books all the time. I just like I like the smell. I like to hold them.
But it's easy for travel. Like if I have to go to
it's terrible traveling. Yeah.
If I have to go to Afghanistan for a year, I don't want to bring 2 boxes of books traveling with me.
Oh no.
So I loved reading. I know I always wanted to be an author, and I just never had time. Well, I never made time, I guess. And so I searched far and wide for an MFA that I could do online, some minimal hybrid or all totally online. And the only thing that was 100% online at the time was University of Texas in El Paso. And they took my GI Bill, and I didn't quite pay for it, but it was pretty close. And so I applied, and they accepted me in 36 hours. they don't have a doctorate level for MFA in creative writing. When you get the creative writing MFA, that's the teaching level for college, and it's 36 hours. And so I started taking that about 6 years before I got out, maybe 7 years before I got out, and took me 5 years just to get, because I was still working as a sergeant major. Yeah, so I had
Wow. Was it neat when you went through your MFA program to be around people through the college that were seasoned writers and could guide you in this process?
I don't want to talk too bad about my
Yeah,
alma
yeah. I
mater,
understand.
but I didn't feel like I really learned to write until
Mm,
after I got out, and some of the courses I'm going to talk to you about, primarily the story grid. But I mean, I went there, and it seemed like, because it was all online, I feel like the professors weren't wholly invested. Unfortunately, some of them were semi-absent. They're like, "Hey, I'm going to look at like 5 students' work this week because I'm on a sabbatical or whatever. I don't know what you're doing." But it was there was a couple of them that were really bad. There was a couple that were really good, and then there's a couple that were kind of okay. But it seemed like there was a lot of peers looking at my work and giving me, advice or suggestions and stuff, but they're at the same level as me. And,
right.
and so that didn't seem like it was very productive. So I didn't feel like I feel like I was getting feedback. Like, I kind of liked it, kind of didn't like it, but there was no specifics of like why they didn't like it or how I could fix it.
Make it better. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that seemed to be, for the majority of my classes, there was 2 or 3 instructors that I loved that gave me really good feedback. And the rest of the time is a lot of peer feedback that I didn't think was fantastic. And I wasn't super happy with it. And I didn't feel like I was a writer at the end. I did try to publish my thesis. I was probably the only person that wrote a book. Like, my whole goal was to write books, and they
Right.
all wanted me to write short stories. All we wrote was short stories. I had one class that was about outlining a book, but it wasn't great. It was like, outline a book and we'll talk about it and we'll grade it. I didn't feel like I was getting any. They didn't seem to use any of these books I have behind me, like Save the Cat Writes a Novel and Book Snowflake Method, and all these different books that I read after I got out that I didn't even know existed. I'm like, why didn't anyone teach me this and walk me through this? That would have been awesome.
Right.
Because they weren't concentrating on novels. Now, there are MFAs out there that concentrate on you writing books, and there are some that specialize in science fiction and fantasy, and there's ones that specialize in different kinds of books, and there's authors. They're probably the most famous and successful science fiction and fantasy author out there. He runs one at BYU, and it's free online on YouTube. You can watch it, and it's great, and it's specifically designed for world building, fantasy, and science fiction. So I didn't have that opportunity because I had to go fully online. I had to take what was there, and for what I paid, and which was nothing, pretty much because of the GI Bill. And I spent 5 years going through it. I didn't go 3 years straight. I had to take some time off to do my other job. It gave me a kind of a base. But I knew I wanted more. So
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the tricky part with a lot of these degrees and how you want to spend that GI Bill, is that you're sort of subject to what academia will offer, and there are so many options, though. Like you said, though, with the hybrid option and being able to do it remotely. But there's things that you lose out by doing things remotely. The face to face and the interaction that you would get by attending in person is sometimes truly invaluable, and you won't get that opportunity if you do it online. But it's good that you had that opportunity. It's interesting that you got more out of being a storyteller once you were out. Now, did you write when you were younger, or did you write on your own up until you got the MFA, or was this just something in the back of your mind, like, hey, I'd love to try this?
So I pretty much stopped writing when I got in the Army. When I
Mm.
was in high school and college, I won awards. I won awards for like my short stories and things like that. Nothing fancy, not any big awards, but like local school awards and stuff like that. And and I always loved reading, and had the dream of being a writer. I didn't know what that consisted of, an author. I didn't know how you did that. I thought there was something, you just had it or you didn't, and you wrote it. And I've realized now that there are skills that you can build on to make you a better writer. But probably the biggest thing that you can do to be a better writer is to read in the genre you want to write in, and be familiar with what other readers like to read, including yourself, and study that, and take a chapter and take it apart and say, wow, what do I love about this chapter? And then, is there a chapter in this book I don't like, and why don't I like it?
Right.
And that's probably, once I went through a couple classes, read a couple books, and then I went back to the books that I loved. That's how I became a better writer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So you get out of the military and you say, okay, what's next? But then you end up overseas. So did you meet your now wife before you got out?
So let's back up.
Okay.
So the 2 years before I wanted to get out, I was thinking I was in Italy. I wanted to extend for another 2 years after what I was supposed to get out. So I was thinking I was getting out at 34 years. There weren't so many limits back then, but the new Sergeant Major of the Army was working behind the scenes. And all of a sudden I'm at 30 in a couple months. And the new plan comes out. And if you're not in a command sergeant major position, and you're not slated or considered to get to a command sergeant major position in charge of people, you have to get out at 31 years. So, which is like now 9 months away. And so I was like, what is going on now? I got to make. And then they came out. I guess someone complained, or maybe more than one, and they said, okay, well, if you're supposed to get out in 9 months, we'll give you till, actually, I think it was I was 1 year back. So I was at 29 or 30, 29, and they say, hey, you have to get out at 30. And then they said, oh, we're going to send it to 31 because you're so close. And so now I had some breathing room, but then I started having to figure it out. And I'd already planned to walk the Camino de Santiago, which is a 500-mile hike across northern Spain. And I was in the middle of a divorce, and I was not sure what I wanted to do. I knew I was interested in being a writer, so I got the MFA in creative writing, but I knew I wouldn't be making any money right off the bat. I had no illusions that I was going to write a bestseller right off the bat. And not to mention I hadn't started except for my thesis, which no agents were looking at. And so I had planned to walk the Camino de Santiago, and I walked it about 6 months before I was supposed to get out. And I was taking a month to do it. That's what most people do. So I did that. And the second day on the walk, I met my wife, who's Hungarian, and we walked the whole thing together. So that was really cool.
Wow. Was she just happened to be at a stopping point and you walked up to her, or you guys?
So after 30 years of jumping out of airplanes and ruck marching and doing other stupid stuff with my body, I walk really slow because my knees, I need a knee operation. I needed a knee operation 15 years ago. So I'd get up at 4:30 or 5 before anyone else did. And I'd be on the trail for 2 hours before everyone else woke up and left. And then they'd catch up to me around 2 or 3 in the afternoon at 25 miles down the road. And so she snuck up behind me. She had a really good pace. And she's like, are you all right? You look like you're much first words that we said to each other. And then I probably was just, I wouldn't let her. I was like, well, let me tell you the story about how my knees got broke,
I love it.
And so that's kind of how we met.
That's so cool. And it's just so crazy, how these chance encounters with people, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you just never know. You never know how life is going to turn out. So,
but the real thing was, so I was trying to figure out what I was doing. I actually wrote. That's the first time I wrote really for myself, was on the Camino. Every night I'd hike, and then I had my phone, and I bought a fold-out typewriter for my phone that was Bluetooth, and I would type the things in notes on my phone. And so that's when I started writing again. And I also got an email from the Story Grid, which is where I got kind of really learned how to write, in my opinion. It's a company owned by Sean Coyne, who had just as many years as I had in the Army. He's been in the publishing business. He was an editor for a lot of the big 5 publishing companies. He was the editor for some really, really famous authors. And he developed his own system for deciding if books are any good. And he wrote about it in this book called The Story Grid. And then he started a company with another gentleman named Tim Groyne, and they call it the Story Grid Universe. And they taught people to become Story Grid editors and use his methodology to edit other people's books. And so I was in the second class he ever gave. And I got this email saying, hey, we're training editors in our methodology. You know, it's going to cost this much. Come up to Nashville for a couple of weeks. We'll teach you, and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, oh, it looks like a sign. That's like right during my transitional leave and my terminal leave. And I was like, I think I'm going to sign up for that. So I did. Right. And I went. And I learned their system. I actually didn't really read the fine print. I didn't know I was being trained to be an editor. I thought I was just using their methodology. And I used their methodology. I read the book and I listened to their podcast and used it on my thesis. And I only used it for the second half, not the first half, because I didn't know about it because that took me 3 years to write it. So in the last 6 months, I was listening to the podcast and I got the book. And I used it, and I wrote the last of it in like 2 or 3 months, the last half of my book, and I turned it in. And when I had to defend my thesis in front of these professors, they all said, you know, the last half of the book was really great. I was like, dang. I was like, there might be something there. And then I got this email,
right.
So I signed up for it, and I went to Nashville in 2019, because 2018 is when I did the Camino de Santiago. And so I went to Nashville, and I said, oh, wait, they're teaching me how to be an editor. Maybe that's a job I should do while I'm waiting around to write. So it took me 6 months to get through the certification. And when I got out, they actually had leads. They had clients for me because people would write them and say, I follow your podcast. I want an editor that knows your methodology. I like it a lot. And so they would feed me clients. And that's where my first clients came from too.
Wow.
So I got my first client in June of almost the month I got out. I had my first editing client, which is a science fiction book that's on my shelf back here. And we did like eight rewrites because I learned. I mean, that was my first one.
Right, you were learning as well.
She's probably listening to this. I don't know if she knows if she was my first one or not, but she really used everything I got, and she got that thing published in a year. And then she wrote her second one, and I just edited her third one earlier this year. So she got a trilogy out. So that's how I got started in this. And then it kind of snowballed. I mean, initially, I got a couple clients the first year, but it wasn't really a lot of money because the hardest part of this business is finding clients.
I bet.
So now I didn't know anything about finding clients or marketing or on social media. I didn't know anything about that. So I had to figure it all out. And it took a while to get off the ground. So I got a job with the VA as a benefits advisor, kind of assistant chief for all of Europe, just as COVID hit. And so I was living in Romania. They wanted me to move to Germany, but Germany closed its borders. I had just flown back to Romania to move. I was, basically I stayed in Romania for a year and worked remotely. And then I built my business at the same time. And by the end of the year, I was making just as much editing as I was for the VA. So when the next year they offered me less money, and
You're just like, no, I've got this. Yeah.
And so I went 100% the next year, and I made more than twice as much as I did the year before. So, but I never turned a job down. I did editing and ghostwriting for books that I never would have thought I would ever be interested in
That's got to be interesting because it's like you almost have to put yourself in the place of somebody who is interested and who is a consumer of that particular genre or that certain story. What was it about the story grid method that you think makes it so tangible or so popular? I mean, most of us who write know, of course, the climax, the rising action, the resolution, the hero's journey. We know kind of you know the guide as Scott Mann had in his book, which I thought was actually interesting. I never thought about the guide, but there's always kind of that person or that thing that guides them as the hero, the hero's journey. So what was it about Story Grid that really that kind of clicked with you?
So Sean Coyne, like I said, had over 30 years in the publishing industry and as an editor and a variety of other things. And he's read thousands of books, right? And he made this thing off of like, this is what I see in the most successful books in these genres. This is what I see in every single one of them. This is what I see in every chapter, in every act, in every manuscript.
What are some of those things? Can you say, like,
sure,
examples?
Sure, the book's out there. So probably the core of it is the 5 commandments, is what he calls it, which is the inciting incident, the turning point, the crisis, the climax, and the resolution. And he applies that to every measure of story, whether it's a scene, a chapter, a sequence, an act, or the whole manuscript. You can find 5 commandments for a whole book. What started off, what was the kind of Paul's last moment is usually where the turning point is. Then you have the crisis question of like, usually if it's an action or a heroic thing, it's like, do I sacrifice my life,
right,
and to do this or not? That's the big question. And usually the hero is going to go that way, but it might be more, like if you go look at the Hunger Games, right? You have that, do I shoot PETA with my arrow and win so I can go back and support my family? Or do I try to trick the president by taking the poisonous berries and with hoping that they'll call it off? So these are the 5 commandments of that whole story. And then you can go into each of the scenes and each of the chapters and say, okay, what these 5 commandments are that they build tension in the scene. So if you have a 500-word scene, you can say, okay, this is what's happened to make the protagonist uncomfortable. He or she didn't expect that to happen. They have a strategy now to fix this problem that just appeared, which was the inciting incident. And so they keep applying things and getting shot down by the antagonistic force of the chapter. And then at some point they have to make a choice because the antagonistic force has shot down all their strategies to overcome this problem. And so now they have to either, if I want to do what I want to do, if I want to accomplish my goal for this chapter, I'm going to have to do something I don't want to do that the antagonist wants me to do, or I'm going to have to forget about the whole thing. And that's the tension building of each scene or chapter. And once you study it, and I'm also working for them still as a contractor because they have scene writing schools or courses every 6 weeks. And basically teaches them this system that they have, the 5 commandments, and then there's a little bit more to it now too. And we just walk them through 6 scenes over 6 weeks, or 5 scenes over 6 weeks, and talk about the system. And then, hey, write a scene, give them some parameters, and then a person one-on-one will look at it and give you feedback through a video. And then you'll rewrite it until we get it perfect. Then you may write 2, 3, or 4 scenes during that time. But basically, it's the 5 commandments are the core of it. And then he's also looked at he's kind of identified 12 genres of fiction books and said, okay, all the romance books, they all have these conventions. They have the lovers meet, they have the lovers break up, they probably have a triangle, some kind of love triangle of some sort. So you have these, 12 things that are all in almost every romance book that's really successful, from Pride to Prejudice to whatever the latest one is. Same thing with action, same thing with thriller, same thing with horror and crime, So he's kind of made, these things are all available for free online. If you go to the website, they have web pages about all the different genres and the conventions and obligatory scenes and things like that. So that's kind of the core of it. And so why do I think the story grid works so well? Because it's based on things that have worked for forever, for hundreds of years. Pride and Prejudice. How old is Pride and Prejudice? A couple hundred years old. So these are the books. They didn't know any of this stuff when the author of Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre was writing their books, but we still read them today, and people love them, and people love to watch the shows about them because the story is compelling and it means something to somebody. So that, just the fact that that is true makes me think that there's something there. I've used the 5 commandments to help people write books, and in memoirs and nonfiction books as well. I've helped people write, congressional papers that they're sending to Congress. Hey, this is what I want to say. All right, let's rearrange it. Let's put an inciting incident here to hook them in, and then get down here and have a call to action in the crisis, and blah, blah, blah. And so there's a lot of stuff that's out there. It's, hooks and call to actions and stuff that maybe the 5 commandments can equate to. But if you have all 5 of these pieces, then it usually works out. So I've rewritten people's FBI applications. I rewrote my niece's college application. And they would say, I went in there, I looked at it for an hour, I rearranged it. And they're like, yeah, you said the same thing I did, but different. And I was like, that's true, but this is a lot better product.
Well, and it's fascinating because it's so much of it reminds me of, painting or acting or any of the creative arts. There's a mix of just this real creative way you want to approach it and how you want to word things and where you want to start, where you want to end. But then there's also, like a song, there is still structure to it. There's still, a song has a bridge, it has a chorus, it has these very specific pieces to it. And if a song doesn't have those things, it's not a popular song. I mean, every pop song has certain sounds that people are familiar with hearing. And we, like you said, we know these things work, and we know, and I would also say, even scientifically, the brain is attuned to it. We're drawn towards this particular formula. And so if you understand that, you're so much more stronger as a writer. And I think a lot of us who do write, we recognize the pattern in storytelling. So we intuitively maybe do some elements of it, but there's pieces of it that we miss because we're not trained on the structure and on the science of it. So yeah, we might have a decent story that gets some type of reception, or like you said, in high school, you were decent, you won awards, but you didn't really have that structure or that foundational knowledge and understanding why you were starting with an inciting incident, or why you had this conflict within the story, or why you chose this order. Now, when we write stories, there's different ways to write it. You can write it chronologically. Like you said, a lot of movies also start off with an inciting incident. They always do, to try to hook you in. And then sometimes they'll go backwards, or they'll jump. A lot of stories will jump different timelines. When you're working with a author, how do you decide? Is it based on genre, how you want to structure the book?
So there's a lot of things. It's unique. It's bespoke. Memoirs are always, I have to listen to the whole story before I can figure out the best.
Yeah, I bet.
So usually when I do memoirs, I'll do 10 to 25 hours of interviews, and I'll put everything together, and I'll listen for the most interesting moment of their life and try to see if that makes sense to put it as an introduction.
Yep.
I just finished a Vietnam vet's memoir. He was a sky raider. He had 200 combat missions in Vietnam. He was also later on, he went back and he closed the Vietnam. He was in charge of all the air when the Saigon was evacuated. And he was also flying a fighter with a nuclear missile on it during the Cuban Missile Crisis. he had a career and a half. And we were trying, and he was telling his story. He's like 85, and he's telling me all his stories. And I was trying to figure out what am I gonna do? And then he comes in like, interview like 8 or 9, like almost the end of the interviews. And he's like, you know what I saw last night? I was like, what'd you see? He's like, I saw that new Top Gun movie. He's like, Maverick? He's like, yeah. I was like, how was it? He's like, man, it took me back. I was sweating. When he lost his buddy, I was having all these memories. He's like, oh, this is it. This is the introduction. So I wrote the introduction as if he went in to see, where he's talking about combat. He's telling a combat story, and it turns out to be Maverick's story. And he's like, yeah, Top Gun was good. Maverick was better, but PTSD is real. And if you sit in that you watch the G's, you watch the turns and everything. And for a fighter pilot, that's what you're back where you were when you were in Afghanistan, Iraq, in his case Vietnam. And so that's why I wrote 2 pages on his introduction, was all about him having flashbacks during watching Maverick and having his PTSD flashbacks, and then talking about his career. The name of his book is called Life in the Fast Lane. So that it was just something I had to get ticked by him, because he had a lot of really good stories, but it was that one that we ended up doing, and it turned out perfect.
I love it. So tell me a little bit about what the journey's been like with deciding like which authors that you work with. Like, you've worked with Scott Mann. So tell me, like, for an example, for him, how did he approach you to do Pineapple Express? I mean, he wrote that, I think, about pretty close to when the Afghan withdrawal happened. It was probably maybe just a couple years after, or a year after. So how did that come about?
It came out on the anniversary.
Yeah.
I guess he got an agent and pitched it like a month or 2 after it was over, and start in August or in 21 or September 21. We had been working on, I didn't know him. We were in the same Green Beret group, and down in Eglin Air Force Base for probably years together, but I didn't know him and he didn't know me. And one of my commanders that I was close to after I got out, he said Scott had done a play, Last Out, that was about Afghanistan, and he had that touring all over the U.S. And my friend went and saw it. He's like, "Hey, you need to go see this play. It's great, and you need to talk to Scott, and because I think he's interested in writing a book, and you're perfect for it." So I went, and he knew Sean Coyne, who invented the story grid, because one of Sean Coyne's authors wrote the foreword for his first book, which was called Game Changers. And so he was really interested in hiring me as a story grid editor to edit his next book. So we worked for a year on that book, and we were almost finished. Like, we were about to do like final edits on it when the evacuation of Afghanistan kicked in, and he went dark. Like, as far as I couldn't communicate with him for like 2 months. I was like, "Hey, I thought you were looking at the book. What's going on?" He wasn't communicating with me or anything.
So wait a second. His book wasn't going to be about the withdrawal. It was going to be just about being a Green Beret in Afghanistan and his experiences?
No. So he had a Game Changer book,
right,
that he wrote 2010, 2011, when we were doing village stability operations in Afghanistan.
Gotcha.
Right. So that was a bestseller, I believe. And he wrote that. I didn't know him then. He wrote it. He was still in the military and that. And then he had gotten out. He had retired, and he had started his own company called
The leadership, rooftop leadership.
Right. And so there's a story behind the rooftop leadership that's in the book as well. And then there's a bunch of other stories. And it is about his methodology for leadership given through village stability operations in Afghanistan, grassroots leadership. And so that's what he wanted me to help him write. And he had like 50 pages. He sent them to me. I was like, hey, let's organize this better. Let's expand it. And so we worked on it for a year. That's what we were working on.
Got it. Okay.
When Afghanistan happened in August, and I couldn't even get a hold of him because he was so busy. And I didn't know what was going on because I was in Croatia. And I wasn't getting any news about Afghanistan and Croatia because I don't speak Croatian. So I didn't even know. I barely knew what was going on. And then finally he got a hold of me. He's like, yeah, I'm involved in Afghanistan. I was like, oh, okay, contract work, whatever. And then like I said, he got an agent and he was really generous because he was like, he said, hey, I want this other guy on board. He's like, well, we should get like a professional editor. It's like, no, this guy's really good. He knows this Sean Coyne's method. And I really believe in it. So he asked me to come on board, I think October, November. And then they started doing interviews. They did, I don't know how many interviews we did, 50 interviews, 100, 150 hours of interviews total or something.
Wow.
So I had 5 or 6 hats. I was the sergeant major. I was keeping people on, hey, timeline, get your stuff turned in. I was transcribing interviews. They had like thousands of text messages off Signal that they couldn't download. But they had screenshots of them all.
Oh, my God.
So those had to be transcribed so we could search them for keywords. So I had to find people we trusted to help to transcribe all that and make sure that they're accurate and not. Anyway, so all that stuff was the prep work, but we didn't start writing until January, and the first draft was due March 30th by the contract they had with the publisher. So here's a little known fact, right? Or maybe people would think if they thought about it, it would be clear. But once especially nonfiction, especially something like this, which is time dependent, right?
Very, very time dependent.
So
yeah.
We're going to take, I don't know. He got an advance, but I don't know what it is. I don't know any of the details of that, but there is a bidding war for it and they had an advance. And once they signed a contract with the Simon & Schuster, there's a timeline. Hey, your book has to be first draft turned in 30th of March. Okay. You get 1/3 of your bonus up front of your advance. You get 1/3 when the draft's turned in, and you get 1/3 when it's published. And that's it. That's what you get. And if you miss deadlines, little known fact, and I don't think they understood that either, because we asked for an extension and they're like, sure, we'll get an extension, but you're not getting your advance. So we didn't start writing till like mid-January. We had 2.5 months to write it. We wrote it in 2.5 months, the first draft.
Wow.
After a month and a half, we had half of it, a little bit over half written, and they asked for an extension. And the guy's like, look, here's how it goes, man. You turn it in March. We look at it. April, we give you the back for changes. You make the changes. You give it back to us. Then it goes to, formatting. Then it goes to, blah, blah, blah. And then the marketing team gets involved so that on August 15th, the anniversary, we have all the news talking about it and we get it out, and it takes 6 months to get it ready.
Yeah.
If you're a month late, all that stuff we had dedicated to you is dedicated to someone else. So you can't be a month late, because if you're a month late, you're 6 months late, because we have to move you to the end because we have contracts with all these other people. So there's not an option where we give you an extra month. That's not the way the system works, because the system is a well-oiled machine and it's already been set in motion. So, and so once that's why I tell some people that come to me is like, hey, should we send a query? It's like, if you need money, if you need an advance, then by all means, let's put a query in. Let's find you an agent. Let's get it in front of publishers and see if they want to give you an advance. Okay. However, if you don't need the money, I would say, let's not do that, because
Right.
you get on their timeline then, and now you got 4 months and you're stressing out, and your kid gets sick, and you don't want to write today or whatever, because the 2.5 months, that was pretty stressful.
I bet.
I was like, I
Wow.
got out of the Army not to work 50 hours a week.
Well, I'm wondering, is that the only time that you've ever done that, where you've worked with a publisher and it was so deadline driven and intense like that?
So that's the first and last time that I said I'm going to work under that kind of deadline.
Right.
And I've told everyone too, up to this point, like, hey, if you want to go get an agent and everything, I'll help you plan it if you want, outline it and stuff. But I am not interested in writing under a deadline anymore, because I got a family that I love, and I don't want to spend 50, 60 hours a week easy. It was
Wow.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then some of the rewrites had to be done like 2 or 3 days. So I didn't go to sleep for like 3 days. It's like, what am I, a ranger? What's going on?
Yeah.
Maybe it was good
Man.
training.
That's just crazy. And I think like people just don't understand. They don't see like what work goes behind this. I mean, this is work.
So Scott's writing, I'm writing, there's other people helping with this, write it, but Scott's writing, but Scott's got a business. So Scott takes like 2 weeks off from his business. Nothing's getting done in his business. He's a speaker. That's what he does for his business. He gives classes. So he shuts his business down for 2 or 3 weeks, easy, maybe even a month. I don't know. And, he's still got to pay employees. If he doesn't show up, the money doesn't come in.
He's the breadwinner for the employees and people that are in his business.
He didn't hire me to ghostwrite it. I ended up, in the end of it, I helped to write some of the other pieces, but that wasn't what he hired me to do. And I think he really wanted to do it all himself, and he did a large part, and I just helped him tweak it. But I was helping him push it through at the end, because I had half a book done.
That's intense. And the thing is that would not have had the impact that it did had you not made that deadline, had you not made that anniversary, and had you not been able to promote it when you did. And that's another thing that people don't think about. I know we're wrapping up towards the end of the hour, but is the idea that sometimes when you do write a book, you do want to maybe match it with a particular anniversary or with a particular point in history, and have that book be a part of that history, especially like what Scott did. He was writing about a moment in U.S. military history. And so it was so important to get that timing correct. So for those who are interested in writing a book, what is your advice for how they get started?
All right. Well, I already talked about, read. I had a guy that hired me to edit his book, and I was reading it. I was like, hey, man, what kind of books do you like? He wrote a fiction book, a fiction like adventure action book. He's like, I don't read fiction. I was like, well, why are you writing fiction? He's like, how hard can it be? I was like, well, it's harder than what you gave me, that's for sure. But so you have to, he didn't even understand the basics of like getting a hook at the beginning of the chapter, just because he's never read fiction before. So, he had no idea. So, and later on I talked to him, like, hey man, you ready to try again? He's like, you know what? You're right. I gave him a couple of books to read. He read them. He's like, you're right. I don't know where I was. So read widely in the genre that you want to write in. If you want to write a memoir, go read a couple of memoirs first and see which ones you like, and see what kind of, how they're written and how they're organized. Because memoirs, there's a couple, there's 4 or 5, maybe 6 methods that I've seen of writing memoirs, and you can, some of them work for some stories and some others. If you're going to write fiction, read in the genre that you want to write. That's the biggest one. Second, there's a crap load of books out there on how to write a story. Just choose one. All of them have good information. I think the Story Grid's the best, but it's a little bit highbrow. You might need someone to explain it to you, because the first time through, I didn't get it, and I had the guy who invented it talking to me. So there's tons of YouTube videos now. They got a whole YouTube channel that has like 100,000 followers, and it's all about their methodology. You can watch those videos. They weren't available when I started, but so Story Grid's a really good place to start. most people need a developmental editor, because especially your first time author for fiction, you don't know what you don't know. And so these people are going to give you really good information.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to need a copy editor. You can self-publish now. People are making, I just went to a publishing conference last week here in Spain. And this guy was a British soldier for 25 years, started writing when he got out in 2017, making $18 a month off his book that he first published. Now he showed his Kindle report. He's made $1.5 million last year.
Wow.
Like the Jack Reacher guy. It doesn't happen to everybody, but there was a bunch of guys making six figures. And it's all about focusing on what you're doing, getting the content out there, good content out there. And now more than ever, it's about marketing your book. It's about the cover and the title. People are looking at covers and titles on Amazon, on their phone, and they're flipping through it. And if they see a cover and title of the genre that they like to read, they're like, hey, is that a Jack Reacher book? No, it's a Ben Fuller book, but it looks like Jack Reacher. Let's see what that's about. Oh, this looks like something I'll like. So if you have a cover similar to Jack Reacher, a guy walking away from the reader into the city, then maybe that's what they're going to turn. They're going to click that button and read about your book, and they're going to like it. Same thing with the romance. You got all these romance books that not necessarily the steamy romance ones, but you got a set kind of thing about your favorite authors, your comparison titles that you have out there. You make it look similar to that, and they're going to say, hey, that looks like my favorite romance author, but it's not. What's this one about? And that's the first thing. You got to attract them in the first couple seconds, or they're never going to see your book.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people get in their own way when it comes to this. I mean, I can certainly see in some of the books that I've read where the person doesn't follow some of these tried and true tactics. They just want to write what they want to write about. And it's like, okay, but your book won't be as successful and it will not reach as many people if you don't try to follow some of these strategies. And so that's why I think it's so important. Where can people find you if they want more information or they want to ask you some more questions?
Yeah, so you can find me at militaryeditor.com. or my other website. Militaryeditor.com is where I help most people with their memoirs or any kind of military fiction books. But I have another website called thestoryninjas.com, which is where I do like science fiction, fantasy, and things like that. But either way, you'll reach me and I'll figure it out. I have a new Facebook page called Ask a Military Editor. I just set it up last week. I only got like 6 people in there, but basically I want to answer any questions you have about writing your military memoir, about, writing your military science fiction book or whatever. If anyone's got any questions, then that's kind of where I went with that. And I'm also starting a YouTube channel because I took after you, called the Military Writers Academy. I just set it up last week as well. And I'm going to be interviewing a lot of the people I've written books for and talk memoirs and stuff. And just and read some of the, like you said, the first introduction, reading the introduction of these books and talking about why we selected this as the introduction and things like that. I also have an internship. I don't know if I want to mention from the SkillBridge program for transitioning service members. So you can find my information on my website. You can write me on there. If you can't find it, just write me an email from there and say you're interested in the internship. Basically, transitioning service members, if they want to learn about freelance editing or freelance writing, either way, I'll teach either one. I'll look at your work and I'll guide you through 2 or 3 months. Once a week, we'll talk about your chapters. We'll talk about your outline if you want to do the writing. If you want to do what I'm doing, which is editing books 20 or 30 hours a week in Spain, in the sun in Spain, and living my best life, then I'll teach you how to be an editor and how I built my business over the next 2 or 3 months. And so you can sign up. The SkillBridge program is in flux right now. I had to renew, and they haven't fully renewed me yet. So somebody wrote me the other day and said, I don't see you on the site, but you can sign up for my internship regardless. Maybe you can't take 3 months off, but I'll be glad to sit down with you for a couple months every week and walk through this process. And I just want to share the information. There's plenty of authors out there that need editors, and we need more good books out there too. So I'll be happy to teach you how to write better too.
I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. All right, Randy, I will meet you backstage. But thank you so much for taking the time to teach all of us about this craft that I know so many of us, enjoy and love. And I mean, I do think that reading is never going to die. There is a part of your brain that is stimulated when you read that is not the same when you're watching a YouTube video or you're just binging on Netflix. I think there's this creative part of you that is aroused as you're picturing a scene in your head. And I think that we all need that stimulation and that exercise, and we need to practice it by doing it as well as by reading it. So thank you so much for the time that you took to talk to us tonight. I am going to go full stage and do my closeout, but please just hang around for a second. I'll say goodbye and I'll meet you backstage.
All right.
All right, guys, that's a wrap for today. I do have another podcast tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to T. Shane Johnson. He is the owner of Big Guns Coffee. I'll be talking to him tomorrow at noon CST, and can't wait to hear more about his business. It was started with his daughter and his journey and his story. And I think it's going to be an amazing show. It's great to be quote unquote back in the saddle again after some travel. And I look forward to bringing you a few shows actually this month. I think each week I'm doing like 2 or 3 podcasts, which is a little more than I normally like to do, but was very excited to do all these. And I wanted to get them all in before I start my internship at my Skill Bridge. So stay tuned. I'll be putting out some details on that shortly. In fact, I do have my Skill Bridge boss coming on as a podcast guest. So stay tuned for the announcement on that. And as I always say, when I close out these conversations, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye-bye now.